Ah yes, the 90s. What a time to be alive. And if you're someone who enjoyed both Alien and Basic Instincts and wanted a movie that gave you the kicks of both, then 1995 was maybe the best year of your life because, ladies and gentlemen, that was the year we got the Skinemax fever dream known as Species, the science fiction movie that was truly one of a kind. This was the first movie that wondered what if the first contact between aliens and humans meant seduction, impregnation, and of course, murder all at the same time. So join us on this ride when we discuss how the stylish, sexy bio-horror movie quickly devolved into a campy B-movie with each sequel, given that the original movie was an H.R. Giger-fueled nightmare that turned Natasha Henstridge into an icon in a matter of days. Before we get into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. It's a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. To understand Species, we have to move a little back in time and look at the history of pop culture first. The thing was, back in the mid-1990s, movie studios were on a mission. Jurassic Park had just come out, and the aftershocks of this phenomenal movie were still felt throughout movie theaters. And owing to X-Files gaining popularity around this time, people were extremely curious about aliens and conspiracies. So, as a result of all this, sci-fi horror was gaining fandom. So it made 100% sense when Species was released in 1995. It was part of a movement, not an outlier. It had everything: sex appeal, violence, creature features, and genetic horror. Species took everything that was popular at the time and mashed it all together. And let's get one thing straight. With so many tropes mixed together in a movie trope smoothie, Species could have been a mess. I mean, the whole premise of the movie sounds like something that you would find airing on Skinemax at 2 a.m. or a film that you would find on a dusty but lucrative bargain bin. A genetically alien woman is so desperate for sex that she breaks out of a lab, but surprise, she goes on a killing spree while also on a seduction spree. That's the basic synopsis of the movie. Tell me it doesn't sound like a softcore sleazefest or some B-movie schlock that would be forgotten right after you watched it. But the thing was, Species was ready to challenge all of those preconceived notions about itself. You see, Species had ambition. It wanted to do something, and it certainly had the budget for it. At that time, Species had a budget of $35 million, which is a huge amount for any horror movie that came out back then. Plus, the creative team behind Species actually knew how to showcase this pulp film like it was a prestige film, and they did it so well. Director Roger Donaldson, whom most of you cinephiles probably know from No Way Out and 13 Days, knew exactly what he wanted to achieve with this film. The movie, despite its campy premise, never leaned into the camp. Instead, it took the concept deadly seriously. If you look at the tonality of the movie, you'll find out that it is very similar to that of Alien or Terminator. The whole thing at the lab went horribly wrong. They played it out as grounded as possible. The science that they explained in the movie was not just some mumbo-jumbo they pieced together, it actually made sense. And the alien on the loose? Sure, the sexual angle of her story is exploitative, but she is a real threat, and the addition of the sexual angle kind of made her whole story a little tragic. So yes, people, this movie had layers. And at the epicenter of those layers, we had Miss Natasha Henstridge. This was her first acting gig, even though she had no background in drama. On paper, she was hired for her looks because Henstridge was a well-established model by that time. However, when you look at her performance, you'll notice that she actually gave us a very nuanced one. As Syl, she was supposed to be seductive, but in a way she is also childish because Syl didn't grow up like us. She's a creature who's trying her best to understand her own instincts that were kept hidden from her for as long as she was alive. But now, suddenly, she had matured, but she didn't know how the outside world worked. Henstridge gave us a performance that was an odd but well-balanced mix of vulnerability and menace, which made her absolutely unforgettable. On top of that, she was backed by a very elite cast. We had Academy Award winner Ben Kingsley playing Xavier Fitch, the morally ambiguous scientist who led the government team that created Syl in the first place. Forrest Whitaker played the role of Dan, the psychic empath, whose ability to feel emotions was presented as an important tool in the hunt. We also had Alfred Molina playing the socially awkward Dr. Arden, and Marg Helgenberger played the strong-willed microbiologist Dr. Laura Baker. Also, Michael Madsen, fresh off of Reservoir Dogs, played the laconic, cigar-chomping government fixer who brought a charm to the hunt. This crew gave Species the ensemble strength, which made it rank far higher than most genre entries at the time. And other than them, we also have Syl. Syl in both her human and alien form, attracted a lot of the crowd, and this is where H.R. Giger entered the chat. Giger is the surrealist biomechanical artist who's best known for his design of the original Alien. He was brought on the set to design Sill's creature form, and let's be real, he ate and left no crumbs. Sill's design is both ethereal and grotesque. She has a slender feminine body with translucent skin. Her sinewy limbs and insectoid details on her body are elements borrowed from deep-sea creatures, wasps, and the skeletal structures that Giger somehow managed to filter through his work to give us this signature horror erotic aesthetic. The creation wasn't just a monster. This was a perverse work of art that Giger was very committed to. He hand-delivered sketches and sculpture maquettes to the production teams and even clashed with the VFX people to bring his creation to life. It has been reported that he didn't really like the final CGI, especially when Sill transforms mid-coupling, because it didn't capture the physicality of his designs. The conflicts were huge, but Giger's contributions to Sill were greater. Sill's alien design remains one of the most memorable female monster designs in cinematic history, quite literally sharing the pedestal with the Alien Queen and the Thing's grotesque mutations. From a technical standpoint, Species managed to blend practical effects with early CGI. The computer animation looks dated now, especially during Sill's transformation, but back then it was super impressive. The production used animatronics for the close-ups, which included but weren't limited to heads and torsos, while the digital effects were used for the morphing scenes as well as the large-scale movements. The result of all that hard work gave us a monster that is believable and extremely unnerving to look at. One of the most surreal scenes from the movie for us has to be when we see Sill finally go through puberty. That train scene is truly something. In a way, we believe that scene, along with Sill's other nightmares like the one where she mated with herself, pushed the boundaries of what mainstream horror could show. It was grotesque, yes, but also metaphorical. But it captured the core tension of the movie perfectly as well. Desire and death walking hand in hand. Beyond what it seems on the surface, Species also touched on the late 90s cultural anxieties. If you're a science nerd, you would know that the Human Genome Project began during that time and started mapping DNA. The idea of cloning has become more and more popular and plausible, and given that the threat of splicing any kind of DNA, especially alien DNA, was now a possibility, it was no longer just science fiction, and that is how Species managed to get under people's skin. It tapped into that unease as it was a product of mankind playing God and tampering with forces we didn't fully understand. Typical horror stuff, we would say. Species could have gone full Frankenstein on us, but instead it leaned more into visual spectacle and, of course, the erotic tension. And surprisingly, it worked very well commercially. The film made over $113 million, and it was a solid win for MGM. Because of the horror and sex blend, this movie was soon a rental store favorite, and the VHS covers with Natasha Henstridge barely clothed made sure the tape was picked up every time. Critically, it was well-loved and dismissed. Some critics praised its stylistic choices and how disturbing it was. Others thought it was a sleazy alien ripoff. Roger Ebert gave the movie a lukewarm thumbs up, noting the energy and polish. So overall, the verdict was that Species was sleazy but also extremely entertaining. The balance that Species somehow managed to get between pulpy and prestige, serious and silly, sexy and terrifying, really worked well for it. The genre fusion between action, horror, sci-fi, and erotica made the movie hard to categorize, and it stayed. It existed on its own strange lane. The marketing machine emphasized the mystery of a beautiful woman who might not be human, the body horror, and the sex appeal in equal measure. So, in the cultural moment, pre-Matrix, post-Basic Instinct, Species got the golden time. It was smart enough to be intriguing, weird enough to be a cult hit, and of course, lurid enough to sell like hotcakes. But then the question comes, how do you do a follow-up from there? Sill is dead, the crisis is averted, what do we do next? Well, if you were in Hollywood in the late 90s, the answer to that question was simple: sequel bait. And oh boy did they go for it. After the huge box office success of Species in 1995, it was kind of inevitable that there would be a sequel. The original had ended on a high note, with a rat being infected with Sill's DNA, so her legacy wasn't dead and people were curious about what would happen next. The studios greenlit Species 2, and when it came out in 1998, much to the surprise of fans, it was nothing like the first movie. While the first movie was a blend of eroticism and existential dread mixed together, the sequel was more about what if Sill was hornier and we had more goo. Despite having a bigger budget, more gore, and more sex, Species 2 lacked substance in terms of character, tone, and mystery. It doubled down on everything that people remembered about the first movie, the nudity and the violence, and it discarded everything else. So there was no eerie, seductive buildup, only mutant space sex. The sequel follows Patrick Ross, an astronaut played by Justin Lazard, who returned from Mars infected with alien DNA. Unlike Sil, Patrick is very aggressive, always horny, and is practically a walking STI. Within the first 30 minutes of the movie, we see Patrick get down to business with several women, impregnate them, and then watch them explode like a human meat balloon as the alien offspring makes its way out of them. The mystery, the science, and the subtlety of the first movie that drew people in were completely gone. Species 2 was a slasher movie dressed in a lab coat. Natasha Henstridge returned in this film, well, sort of. She plays Eve, the clone of Sil that was kept in a lab and always monitored for signs of alien behavior. You would notice a huge difference between her portrayal of Sil and Eve, and I think it's because the script barely gave her anything to do other than react to the chaos around her and then shift into her alien version for the final showdown with Patrick. Michael Madsen returned as Press Lennox, but he lacks the spark we saw in the first film. It almost seems like someone promised him that this movie would be quick, but now that it actually isn't, he isn't very happy about it. But these are all minor problems with Species 2. The main problem with this movie is the fact that it completely misunderstands what made the first work so well. Species walked the tightrope between sex and horror masterfully, and Sil's sexuality was portrayed as both powerful and tragic. However, in the second film, the sexuality is complete titillation. Her existence is explained away with the whole Martian DNA, and the pacing is completely off. It feels like you're jumping from one cutscene about aggressive sex and death to the next. The director of this movie, Peter Medak, popular for his work on The Craze, leaned more into the shock value, giving us grotesque set pieces without any real tension. The best way to describe his work is the lack of vision. There are a lot more special effects now, but they are a lot less inspired. Sure, the creature design still had Giger's influence even though he was no longer involved, but the design lacked the soul we saw in the first film. Sil had an elegance about her, which was completely destroyed in the second film. Instead, we got more tentacles, more birthing sacs, and a really bad parody of the first movie and the concept it laid down. And while there was a strong marketing campaign involving the promise of a more extreme sequel, the audience noticed the things Species 2 lacked. So, as you can guess, it bombed. With a budget of $35 million, the movie grossed under 20 mil at the domestic box office. Critics eviscerated it. Ebert called this movie dumb and repellent. The mainstream viability of the movie was completely evaporated almost overnight. But MGM didn't stop there. What followed was a slow, depressing slide into the direct-to-DVD abyss. After the disastrous Species 2, we got Species 3 in 2004. It went straight to DVD and acted as a continuation, which somehow felt even cheaper. We got Sunny Mabry playing the role of Sarah, Eve's daughter, and here, she's supposed to get help from a college student navigating her alien life while half-breeds are trying to destroy her, because that's a thing now. There was no production value, no tension, and no pacing. Everything about this movie was downgraded. Even Natasha's cameo seemed downgraded. The monster effect tried to copy Giger's style, but failed and looked worse. Then, 3 years later in 2007, we got Species: The Awakening with a new alien hybrid named Miranda. There are no returning characters in this movie, which is sort of a blessing. Set in Mexico for the most part, the plot focuses on Miranda's scientist dad trying to fix her before she mutates. The movie was a half-baked soap opera, and there was nothing that would make this movie stick in the minds of the audience. The movie is the kind of thing you play in the background while you do your chores and scroll through your phone. The fundamental flaws in all the sequels were the same. The budget cuts led to laughable effects and subpar sets. There were formulaic repetitions of the sex-death cycle, and it didn't do much. There was no innovation, so the franchise didn't grow, and the biggest blow was when Madsen and Henstridge both left the franchise. Without them, the movie didn't even have enough charisma to carry forward the series. And that's what really stings. Species had the potential to be big, to make it big. The messages from space, the spliced DNA, the secret labs, the broader alien network, all of this could have created a world that would have been rich. Instead, we got bad science, boobs, and blood over and over and over again. The genetically engineered alien hybrid as an idea was interstellar. A sequel could have focused on the alien planet from which Sil's DNA is based, or what led to the creation of the signal that triggered the creation. We could have had political cover-ups, the space mission, and existential horror. Alien meeting Black Mirror meeting Fringe. Instead, we got sexy aliens gone wild. Even the themes of the first film about female sexuality, reproductive horror, and nature versus nurture were dropped. The first film explored the idea of whether Sil was evil or if she was just following her instincts. Could she have been different if she had been given a more normal life? Was humanity right in the first place to create her? All of these deep questions remained unanswered, and for the sake of what? Showing more skin? And by the time the mid-2000s rolled around, fans didn't care about erotic thrillers. Saw, The Descent, and 28 Days Later were reshaping the horror genre. It was evolving with darker and grittier tones, and in comparison, Species seemed like a relic. In hindsight, it was evident that the franchise had become a victim of its own formula. There are no creative risks or narrative shifts if the premise is simply hot alien seduces and kills. Alien, in comparison, has reinvented itself multiple times, but Species simply devolved over time. Behind the scenes of the first movie, tensions were already brewing under the surface. The tension kind of reached its boiling point as sequels stacked up. The original film had the right cocktail of science fiction and sex appeal, but from the creative standpoint, it was like a powder keg that had already caught fire. To understand what I mean, we need to rewind a little. Species began as a high-concept script with legitimate Hollywood backing. MGM wanted to cash in on the science fiction craze that happened post-Jurassic Park. Dennis Feldman, the writer, pitched the wild idea of the movie, and it was supposed to be a metaphor for humanity's inability to understand danger when it comes from unchecked scientific ambition. However, from the very beginning, the movie had dual personalities. Feldman wanted something that was supposed to be cerebral, something that would show existential dread with horror elements. However, MGM saw only the sex and violence. The marketing heavily leaned into Henstridge's infamous nude scene and the Giger-designed alien visuals. What was supposed to be like 2001: A Space Odyssey instead became more like Basic Instincts with tentacles. The conflict of creative visions got worse with each film. Donaldson gave us the first film with balance, but Peter Medak took it all for a ride in the second film, making it more graphic and sexual. The biggest blow for the franchise was when Giger decided to leave. His brilliant design for Sil is unforgettable. Part human, part nightmare. She was sensual but deadly. Her bone plating, spiked limbs, hair, and everything else were visualized as myths. That's right, Giger was creating a myth. Sil isn't iconic because she's a monster, she's iconic because she's the embodiment of a warning about tampering with the unknown. However, Giger's experience working with Species was unpleasant, as stated in many interviews and verified by sources. Giger was frustrated with the Hollywood process. His vision wasn't respected, and the filmmakers altered his designs without his consultation, and he wasn't credited properly for his work. So it made sense that when Species 2 rolled around, by that time, Giger had wiped his hands from the project, and you could tell. The visual language anchoring the story in the first movie was gone. The alien forms lost their elegance and became grotesque body horror. The third and fourth movies of the franchise looked like they were shot in a warehouse with a smoke machine and a rubber suit. Giger wasn't just the one who created the design, he was the spirit of the franchise. He embodied the sleek, erotic dread that Feldman wanted to convey, and with him gone, so was that. The creative core crumbled and the budgets took a nosedive. When Species 2 flopped, MGM pulled the plug and things looked worse than before. The Species 3 movie looked like it was shot because someone had a contract to fulfill. The Oscar-winning actors were nowhere to be seen, the dialogue was dead, the sets were recycled, and the identity crisis of the franchise was evident. What was the franchise even about anymore? Was it erotic horror? Was it a campy creature feature? What was it about? No one knew. Every entry pulled it in a different direction, and the genre confusion left every movie feeling like the bootleg version of the original. And the worst part? The franchise never attempted to do a soft reboot of the series. Species held on to the same tired hand of seduction and death with rinse and repeat, while the genre as a whole was moving away from it. There was no attempt to innovate or adapt to what the audience wanted, and so the franchise died with a whimper. Not because it was bad, because no one behind the scenes really cared enough to keep it good. The Species saga has given us the most dramatic critical drop-off in sci-fi horror history. The first movie opened with mixed reviews. Critics had polarizing comments, some appreciating it, while others dismissed it. On Rotten Tomatoes, it's at 42%, which isn't much, but it is leagues above its descendants. Even if the plot wasn't the movie's strong point, critics accepted that the film had a glossy production and gave us striking visuals. Audiences, on the other hand, were far more forgiving. It did great at the box office with $113 million worldwide. It also did well on home video as the erotic horror angle made it a late-night cult favorite. Species 2, on the other hand, has only 9% on Rotten Tomatoes for its lack of nuance, tone, and subtlety. The movie barely cracked $19 million on the US market, and even the longtime Species fans voiced their opinions about this movie's juvenile tone. The other two films of this franchise don't even have an official Rotten Tomatoes score because they're so low in profile. When critics reviewed them, they were harsh because the scripts were boring, the effects were bad, and the performances were flat. They weren't movies, they were simply placeholders. However, it is a good thing that over the years, time has been kinder to the original movie. In the 2020s, Species is considered a cult gem, a product of that era that dared to blend genres together. The performances are appreciated, especially that of Natasha Henstridge, because of her mix of vulnerability and menace. Even Giger's work continues to be celebrated in retrospectives and art books. But every fan, even the die-hard ones, draw the line after the first film because Species 2 is an absolute train wreck, and Species 3 is something you watch when you're stuck in a hotel room without Wi-Fi. So in short, the franchise went from a provocative pop culture curiosity to a punchline in less than a decade because no one cared. And let's be honest, another reason why the first film worked out as spectacularly as it did was because of the cast. The plot could have been easily mistaken for softcore alien erotica, but MGM went ahead and got an all-star lineup. Oscar winners and noms, big-budget veterans, and character actors who have elevated the material beyond the B-grade movie premise. Each of them brought something new to the table. Kingsley gave Fitch this slick, ruthless intelligence, while Whitaker made Dan the empath compelling. Alfred Molina was grounded in the latter parts of the film with some quiet gravitas, and Madsen turned Press into a charming anchor. But the real star of the show was always Natasha Henstridge. She was cast straight out of modeling with no prior experience in acting, yet her performance is the best. She's the face of the franchise. She played Syl as a creature who was trying to find her place in the world around her and understand it, while her biological imperative was uncontrollable. She was a femme fatale, but also a child. When she transforms into her alien form, you don't know if you should be afraid of her or pity her. Henstridge struck the right balance between seduction and sympathy. She played Syl as inevitable. This nuance elevated the performance beyond what anyone expected. And it makes complete sense why the franchise never found the magic again. Species 2 gave us the passive clone Eve, played by the returning star Henstridge, but she was an object to be controlled, not a predator with agency. By the time the third movie rolled around, we had Sunny Mabry as Sarah, and she really tried, but she lacked Henstridge's haunting presence. Mabry's alien seductress was more of an awkward one-liner kind of gal. When Helena Madsen showed up in the fourth part, the formula had grown cold and she had nothing to work with. The truth is that in a story like this, no matter how good the effects are, without a magnetic lead, the story would fall into a lull. Syl was the heart of the franchise, and everybody else was chasing her silhouette, barely coming close. So what is Species now? Well, it's a cult classic, but with a very peculiar legacy. The deeper lore, the sci-fi ambition, Giger's visuals, and everything in this movie franchise took a back seat. Well, Species came to popularity as that sexy alien movie. Species was a part of the wave of R-rated movies that flirted with taboo. It dared to be unapologetically adult, stylized, and provocative. It played like a metaphor of men's fear of female sexuality, and it sold big because the metaphor was wrapped in sci-fi tropes and movie aesthetics. All of that went down the drain in less than a decade. Despite such a huge fall from grace, Species is still an icon in the horror genre. It's always there when best alien design is a topic of discussion. Syl is mentioned whenever iconic female monsters are discussed. Giger's contributions, although limited to the first film, are one of the strongest aspects of the legacy of Species. Syl is one of the most unique female creature designs, and this duality still influences creature designs even to this day. Species, in the broader scope of sci-fi today, is uncharted territory. It was a road that was not taken. We lost potential to explore the mystical alien world. There is potential to examine what happens when humans play God. We missed the chance to build on the Species universe from aspects beyond sexuality. We also lost the opportunity to go full Giger because his unique artistic style brought Syl to life. But most of all, we lost identity. Rather than evolving like aliens, Species turned into a cycle, rinsing and repeating the same formulaic things because they just wanted to play it safe. If it had only radically rethought its own tone, Species would have been something. In today's landscape, we have the atmosphere and the room for a species reboot, but this reboot would have to leave behind the exploitative lens. Instead, it should double down on the surreal and terrifying aspects, bring a strong female lead, give her agency and complexity, give us the Giger-like visual terror, and most importantly, don't play it safe. Species as a franchise died because it got lazy. A modern iteration could confront the audience with their own fears of the unknown and uncontrollable, because that's where the real horror lies. Marvelous verdict. Species was never perfect. It was bold, bizarre, and weirdly stylish. It was different. The sequels dragged its name through the mud, but the original still remains a fascinating artifact of 90s genre filmmaking. Species ended up in the mud because of a series of missed opportunities, a lack of ambition, and creative compromises. And if the franchise ever returns, it needs to remember, we don't want skin-deep clones. We want something that bites and won't let go, no matter what. With that, we come to the end of this video. Let us know what you guys think about Species as a franchise. Us personally, we will always be Team Natasha Henstridge, but what about you? Let us know in the comments down below, and if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.